A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Filled with the Holy Spirit, Jesus returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the desert for 40 days to be tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and when they were over, he was hungry. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread." Jesus answered him, "It is written, one does not live on bread alone." Then he took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a single instant. The devil said to him, "I shall give you all this power and glory, for it has been handed over to me, and I may give it to whomever I wish. All this will be yours if you worship me." Jesus said to him in reply, "It is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, him alone shall you serve." Then the devil led him to Jerusalem and made him stand on the parapet of the temple and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you, and with their hands they will support you, lest you dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him in reply, "It is also written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test." When the devil had finished every temptation, he departed from him for a time. The Gospel of the Lord. The other day on Ash Wednesday, we had maybe 1,400 people coming through to receive ashes to begin this beautiful season, this challenging season of Lent. And it was instructive for those of us who were administering the ashes to hear those words over and over again. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you will return. Remember. And so that remembering sets the tone for the season. Somebody sent me a Ash Wednesday meme the day after, a dust and ashes joke, you might say, that goes like this. You come from ashes, you will return to dust. You come from dust, you return to dust. That's why I don't dust. It could be somebody I know. And when I mentioned that at one of the other masses, the person said to me he was reading something where about 40 to 50% of the dust at home is a dead skin around the house. So remember, you are dust. It's good to smile and laugh because there's not a lot to smile about these days with the war raging in Ukraine by Russia. Or actually, not so much by Russia, but by Putin. Satan incarnate for sure. The devil was not just in the desert 2,000 years ago, but right now in Europe, and always out there somewhere, sometimes even inside of us, certainly inside of me. I remember as a kid praying for the conversion of Russia from communism, which is what the Blessed Mother asked of the world at Fatima in 1917. But then, in 1991, some 75 years later, the Soviet Union collapsed. And I remember thinking back then in 91, wow, not a single Hail Mary was wasted. It took time, but not a single Hail Mary was wasted. Was it a miracle of diplomacy and democracy? Or was it a miracle of prayer? Personally, I think it had a lot to do with the worldwide focus on the slow but steady power and perseverance of prayer. Prayer changing hearts from the bottom up to leaders, changing hearts and overcoming obstacles of self-interest and self-preservation for the greater good of humanity. Prayer works. The problem for fallen humanity, the problem for us, is that our memories are short. And because our memories are short, we can relapse. We can relapse again and again, and so easily, so readily in our personal lives, as individuals, and as a global community, go backwards. That's why the line that strikes me the most in today's gospel that we just heard is the very last one. When the devil had finished every temptation, he departed from him for a time. For a time. For the moment. The ashes, the dust of Satan is always out there in the air. Be careful what you shake up. So St. Luke adds this one distinctive detail to his version of the temptations. The devil departs for a time. While Mark and Matthew end this scene of the temptations in their gospel stories with angels ministering to Jesus, Luke says, the devil departed for a time. It's interesting to note also that St. Luke depicts angels at Jesus' birth, as you can see in the window over here. The angels at Jesus' birth, and not again until the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus is tempted to give up, to consent, to just throw the towel in. At that point, in Luke, Jesus tells his disciples, "You have stood by me in my temptations." Notice, plural, temptations. So at this point, standing by the people of Ukraine in prayer, in solidarity, with so many temptations to despair, to surrender to the demonic Putin, is what we should be doing, hoping, trusting, and advocating with world leaders to do everything possible to drive away this Satan in our midst, in our world. It will take time, and prayer, and much work again for the conversion of this one Russian masquerading as a Christian. But at the same time, the question is, what about us? What about our own journey? What about our own journey in the war, the battle against Satan? Lent calls us to remember, not just that we are dust and will return to dust, but that the devil is real now. He comes and he goes as freely as dust circles around us. So notice in the temptations to Jesus, notice in the temptations to ourselves, that the temptations aren't just enticements to do outright evil, like Putin is doing. But more commonly for us, the temptations are to twist something good for our own convenience. The trickiest thing about the temptations is that they often arrive in the camouflage of good ideas or neutral ideas. Evil sneaks into the world, sneaks into our lives when we succumb to that serpentine voice asking us to use something good for a twisted purpose. So money isn't evil, but the love of money can often lead to evil. And alcohol isn't evil, but the abuse of it is. And so we can say the same thing about beauty and power, credit cards. We can say the same thing about technology, certainly about the internet or food and almost anything else that's essentially either good or neutral, but could be abused. So perhaps a good practice this Lent would be to sit down, maybe write down, to sit down and admit to ourselves what we might be addicted to, what we might feel that we can't live without, and to try to do something about those proclivities in these next 40 days. Notice also that the devil waits. The devil is very patient. And he waits until after the 40 days of Jesus being in the desert, when Jesus is hungry and Jesus is tired. People who are in the recovery field have this acronym. And the recovery field, which says, watch out for HALT, H-A-L-T. Watch out when you're hungry or angry or lonely or tired. Because it's then that human beings are most vulnerable. And it's then that we need to call upon that beautiful responsorial psalm, be with me, Lord, when I am in trouble and need. H-A-L-T. So our temptations, when you think about it, aren't necessarily signs of weakness, but of strength. Because we're not tempted to do that which we can't do, but that which is within our reach and within our power. So the greater the person's power, the greater will be the temptations. On the backside of every strength, every gift, every blessing that we have is its hidden weakness, the Achilles heel, you might say. So if you're beautiful, the temptation might be to use that beauty to open doors for yourself or to invest too much into self-worth and superficial and temporary appearances. If you're wealthy, the temptation could be to become possessed by your possessions rather than to use what you have for God's glory and for the good purposes of other people. If you're a powerful or a popular person in any way, the temptation might be to believe that you're essentially different than the rest of humanity, better than others, and therefore worthy of their service and their adoration only. So the question today is, on this Temptation Sunday, why was Jesus tempted? Why do we have these possibilities? And why has humankind been tempted from the very beginning, from the Garden of Eden? And the only one answer to that is because of human freedom. God created free people, not robots. The possibility of refusing evil, refusing temptation, enhances and intensifies our inner freedom to be our best selves, to be at peace in our hearts. Jesus was like us in all things but sin. He showed us that resisting, not eliminating, but resisting temptation is humanly possible. How could we ever hope to resist temptation had not Jesus himself been tempted, which he overcame over and over again? You stood by me in my temptations. So anyone who lives with passion, anyone who becomes deeply committed to the cause of Jesus and the teachings of the gospel will be tempted in the same ways he was. And I think, when you look around the church this morning, it's very interesting to think that really most of us here today would have a bigger target on our back or on our forehead where we've got the ashes, a bigger target for the devil than others who are not here. We can be grateful to St. Luke for telling us that temptation wasn't a one-time event for Jesus any more than it is for us. With that in mind, today's gospel then invites us into these 40 days of Lent as a time to contemplate, as a time to learn Jesus' decision from his decisions about how to be a faithful son or daughter of God. He did it to show us how to do the same. So let's remember, not just that we are dust, but that we need to keep returning to conversions over and over again along the way, because the devil only leaves us for a time. A Hail Mary, a single prayer is never wasted in the war, in the battle against Satan, as we listen to Mary telling us, do whatever he tells you, whatever Jesus tells us, not the devil. And so prayer isn't just this last-ditch pass to the end zone, as people often talk about in football games, but a life vest. A life vest to renewal and ongoing transformation for ourselves and our troubled world. Remember, the devil leaves for a time. Satan is real, but over time, prayer works. And that's why we're here.